Imagine this for a second. A king, a man who people believe rules by the literal will of God, is arrested and put on trial by his own subjects. And the charge? Treason. Not a crime against him, but a crime by him, against the very kingdom he was born to rule. It sounds completely impossible, right? But in 1649 England, it actually happened. So let's dive into this incredible story.
And these words from King Charles I himself tell you everything you need to know about his mindset. The moment they dragged him into that courtroom, he just refused to accept its authority. In his world, a king simply can't be judged by his people, because his power doesn't come from them. It comes directly from God. This one statement really, it sets the stage for this epic clash of ideas.
And that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? How do you even do that? Well, Parliament basically had to invent a whole new kind of law to justify what they were doing. A law that said the people were actually above the monarch. So you see, this wasn't just a trial for one man. It was a trial for the very idea of what a king is.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's January 1649. The English Civil War has just ripped the country apart. The side that won, Parliament, creates this special body, the High Court of Justice, for one single unprecedented purpose: to put their own king on trial for his life.
Now, here's where it gets really clever. You have to appreciate the legal gymnastics going on here. For centuries, treason meant one thing: betraying the king. So the court did this revolutionary flip. They argued that the kingdom and its people were the real sovereign, and that Charles, by waging war against them, had committed the ultimate betrayal. He wasn't the victim of treason. He was the one who had committed it against England itself.
So what was the prosecution's argument exactly? I mean, they couldn't just say he was a bad king. They came with a list, a very specific list of grievances that they believed proved he'd crossed the line from king to tyrant.
So the court starts laying it all out, point by point. They pointed to his history of imposing taxes, like this thing called ship money, without getting Parliament's okay. They brought up how he'd throw his political enemies in jail without a trial. And then, the biggest one of all, he raised an army and started a horrifyingly bloody civil war against his own subjects. To the court, these weren't just the actions of a king. They were the actions of an enemy of the state.
And this right here, this is the absolute core of their legal revolution. The court basically declared that power doesn't flow down from God to the king. No, it flows up from the people. And if the people are the true source of all power, then the king is just an officer, a public servant who's been entrusted with that power. And if he abuses it, well, then he can be held accountable, just like anybody else.
But King Charles, he didn't even bother arguing about any of these charges. He didn't deny the taxes or the war. His defense was way simpler, and in his mind, a lot more powerful. He basically said the court itself was an illegal sham, and he wasn't playing.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. You're watching two completely different legal universes just smash into each other. You've got the revolutionary view, where power comes from below, versus centuries of English common law, which said power comes from above. For Charles and his supporters, a king literally could not commit treason. That would be like your own head committing treason against your body. It just didn't make any sense.
So his main tactic was just silence. He refused to enter a plea, guilty or not guilty. He argued, look, this court was cobbled together by a fraction of Parliament, not the real legitimate government, so you have zero right to judge me. Every time they asked him to answer the charges, he just shot back, by what authority do you even ask me? He was playing a totally different game, one where he only had to answer to God.
Well, Charles's defiance, as principled as it was, didn't work. The court just kept moving forward, determined to see this whole revolutionary project through to the end. And the climax of the trial, well, it was a decision that would echo through history forever.
59. That's the number. Out of more than 130 judges who were appointed, only 59 were actually willing to sign the king's death warrant. So you see, this wasn't some unanimous decision by a united country. It was the act of a very determined minority who truly believed they were acting for the people, and they would go down in history with a new name: the regicides, the king killers.
And so the verdict came down: guilty. The chief judge, a lawyer named John Bradshaw, stood up and formally declared that Charles Stuart, King of England, was a tyrant, a traitor, a murderer, and a public enemy. The sentence was death by beheading. The unthinkable had actually happened.
But the story is far from over, because you have to fast forward 11 years, to 1660. The monarchy is restored.
Charles's son, Charles II, comes back to the throne and, well, he's got a very, very long memory. The time for revenge had finally arrived.
So the new king passes this law, and on the surface it sounds pretty forgiving. It was called the Act of Indemnity and Oblivion. Sounds nice, right? Forgiveness and forgetting. It offered a pardon to almost everyone who was involved in the Civil War. But, and this is a huge but, there was a poison pill hidden inside, a list of names who were explicitly excluded from the pardon. The 59 men who signed that death warrant, they were now marked men.
And they did not waste any time. The Crown's retaliation was swift, it was brutal, and it was methodical. As soon as that act was passed, the hunt began. Within just 2 years, more than a dozen of the regicides who were still in England were rounded up, tried, and publicly executed. And for some, even death wasn't an escape.
The revenge came in all sorts of forms, each one designed for maximum terror and public humiliation. Some of the men were subjected to the truly gruesome medieval punishment of being hanged, drawn, and quartered. 19 others were just thrown into prison for the rest of their lives, and for dozens more, they had their property and their lands seized, basically destroying their families financially for generations.
And if you thought that was bad, listen to this. It may be the most macabre act of revenge imaginable. The new king ordered the bodies of the revolution's key leaders, like Oliver Cromwell and the chief judge, John Bradshaw, to be dug up from their graves. Their corpses were hanged, their heads were cut off and stuck on spikes outside the very same hall where they had condemned the king, and they stayed there for decades, a constant, chilling warning to anyone who would ever dare to challenge the crown again.
But not everyone was caught. A few of the king's judges actually managed to escape. And this is where the story takes a really wild turn and connects directly to America. 3 of them, John Dixwell, Edward Whalley, and William Goff, managed to get on a boat and cross the Atlantic. They lived out the rest of their lives as fugitives in New England. And get this for the final ironic twist of history. The city that sheltered them, New Haven, Connecticut, eventually named 3 of its major streets in their honor.
So when you look back on all of this, what are we supposed to make of it? Was this the birth of the modern idea that no one, not even a head of state, is above the law? Or was it just a political show trial, a perversion of justice that was always going to lead to a bloody cycle of revenge? You know, maybe the real answer is that it was both, a moment that absolutely changed our understanding of power, but also a brutal reminder that when a war is over, the winners are the ones who get to write the law.